Hey guys, it's Tombox, and this part of the FSA we're going to be covering the hidden gems and underrated cards of Rise of the Duelist. Now this video is sponsored by Bushiroad. Vanguard Zero is finally out for iOS and Android. Whether you're new to Vanguard or a Vanguard veteran, now's the chance for you guys to play on your mobile device. Now Vanguard Zero is based off of the original trading card game Card Fight Vanguard. Aside from the familiar gameplay, it features a story mode that reproduces the original anime of Card Fight Vanguard. As you ride up to grade 11, you can take on other fighters around the world with online battles. Another interesting feature is once you get to grade 8, you get to unlock your room where you can hang out with your favorite characters. I remember playing Vanguard when it first came out about 9 years ago, and this is a great way to dive right back in, especially when most of us cannot access a game store physically right now. Make sure you guys get Vanguard Zero by downloading it from the App Store or Google Play. Link in the description. Hey guys, it's Tombox, and we are going into all the underrated and underappreciated cards of the Rise of the Duelist. This is not going to include all the major archetypes of Dogmatica, Infernobles, Melfi, and Gaia. Those will be covered in a separate video on Monday. Throughout this video, I'm going to give you guys some of my picks of some of the best underrated cards of this entire set. Maybe it'll be the next spicy tech that someone tries out. Who knows? But this is what we're here for. We're here to find those hidden gems perhaps you can use in the future. And I'm going to be doing all that under 20 minutes because you guys don't have time to read like 60 different cards. That's like tons of card text. I've summarized it all down to a compact form so you guys know the gist of all of these effects. And if I don't finish within 20 minutes, I got a heat stroke because the fan is off. So you guys can't hear like a buzzing noise in the background because that gets pretty annoying, and I care about your ears, so make sure you guys smash that thumbs up button, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and let's do this. Firstly, we have the Darklords, 5 of the cards on the chopping block. We have the first Darklord, Capricious Darklord, Indulged Darklord, and Darklord Nurgle. And for the trap card, we have Darklord Uprising. So for the first Darklord, he is a fusion monster requiring 3 dark fairies as fusion material, and the effects are as follows. Protection for all fairies from targeting. If you use Morningstar as a part of his material, you get to nuke your opponent's entire board by destroying every card they control, and during the main phase, it has a quick effect where you can pay 1,000 life points to special summon out a fairy from your hand or graveyard. That's a pretty decent card, but it doesn't offer you generic destruction protection, so he's still pretty easy to get rid of. But if you can summon 2, you can maybe loop the 2 together. That sounds like an option. Capricious Darklord is one of the lower level Dark Lords, and funny enough, it seems like Condemned Witch has corrupted these girls. So Capricious one has 0 attack, and this is one monster that you typically would give to your opponent if you summon out Indulged Darklord. Now quick effect, you can tribute summon 1 Darklord, and that's really it. But if it's sent to the graveyard, your opponent will lose 500 times the number of fairies on the field across all the monsters they control. So that's a pretty big stat drop if it gets sent to the graveyard. Indulged Darklord is like the Stratos. So you take 2 different Darklords, summon one to your opponent's side of the field, and then add the other one to your hand. The one that's summoned to their field, of course, and the one you add to your hand must have different levels. But if you use this effect, you're locked into only using fairy effects for the rest of the turn. So it does come with a bit of a lock, which doesn't let Darklord kind of skyrocket into the best tier ever. Then there's Darklord Nurgle. He's basically any of the other Darklord. He's big, he pierces, and that's really it. He can shuffle stuff back into the deck and copy the effect, much like every other Darklord in the Darklord lineup. Then there's Uprising. So this is the trap that acts as a fusion gate because it lets you summon out a fusion monster. It has a cost though. You have to use a Darklord monster. You have to send one to the grave. That's a cost. And then you fuse from your hand or field for a dark fusion monster. It can be any dark fusion, and you gain the life points equal to the original attack. This is okay. I don't know if Darklords are gonna gain a huge advantage from this, but I do appreciate Indulged Darklord because that provides them with the search. They can search their eggshells. They can search basically anything that they really need. And this also gives them a normal summon that they can use because normally all the Darklords are just way too high level from before. Next line, we have the Fluffals. And Fluffals, we have Edgem Scythe, we have Fright for Cruel Whale, Fluffal Dolphin, that's a cute pink dolphin, Fright for Repair, and Fright for Jar. So Edgem Scythe is a card that I put my stamp of approval, one of the recommended cards, because it is a hand trap that lets them fuse. So on the opponent's main phase, they can reveal this card and they can fuse with it using it as a material, and they can fuse from the hand or the field. And that's a pretty big deal. They can go into something that could perhaps pop your opponent's cards, such as the Fright for Cruel Whale, which only requires a Fluffal monster and an Edgem monster to make. So it's really generic, and this is the stuff of nightmares because on summon it gets to pop, 1 card on both sides of the field. And Edgem Scythe in the graveyard acts as Fright for Fusion Monster Destruction Substitution. fusion. You can banish it out of the graveyard. And it also has a quick effect for attack gaining by sending a Frightfur card from the deck or extra deck, except Whale, into the graveyard, and you'll gain that attack. Here's a note. It says the Frightfur card, so I guess you can still send spells and traps, but then I guess you won't gain anything because it's not a monster. I don't know. Maybe we need some confirmation there. And then there's a cute little dolphin right there. Fluffal Dolphin. It's a fairy monster, guys. It's not even aqua, and it's wearing a lifesaver. That's pretty cute. And I guess on the field, it can activate. It resets a toy vendor from the graveyard back onto the field, and then it sends to the graveyard if an Edge of Sabers or a Fluffal monster. Technically, you're going to send wings so that you can get a full effect right there and draw cards and set up everything. And if you use this card as a fusion material, take that poly or fusion card that you use and put it back into the deck from the graveyard. Give us the entire deck cycling power, which it never had before. And then there's Frightfur Repair. Just take back one of your Frightfur monsters, put it back into the extra deck, and special summon out an Edge Imp monster or a Fluffal monster from your graveyard. So it's a monster reborn that gives back your fusion targets, which is pretty awesome. And you can banish from the graveyard to summon out a Fluff or an Edge Imp monster from your hand. So it gives you a lot of effects here, but it is OEPT, which is one effect per turn, once per turn. So it is one or the other. You don't get both. And then there's Frightfur Jar. The name on the field and graveyard, it counts as a toy vendor, which is quite interesting. And you can discard a card to draw and show it to your opponent. If it's an Edge Imp monster, pop a card. Not an Edge Imp monster, give yourself a minus because you got to put a card back to the top or bottom of the deck. And then, well, if this card's sent to the graveyard, which kind of matters to the Frightfur Cruel Whale, I believe, you get to target and half the attack of one of your opponent's monsters. So that's a pretty good card effect. Overall, Edge Imp Scythe can be a surprise factor because during your opponent's main phase, even before you take your turn, you can actually fuse into something and blow up some of your opponent's setup. And I think that is a major deal. Next, we go into archetypes that Konami threw a bone at so that they can have something to play with. Starting off with Ancient Warriors. I actually love the Ancient Warrior stuff. So the Ancient Warrior cards, they got my stamp of approval for some of the most underrated stuff because it's actually really amazing. So first of all, we got Bimmy and Jimmy Double Dragon Lord. If you guys don't know that reference, it's a really old reference. But first of all, the effects. All Ancient Warriors gain 500 attack. It's a searcher, so upon summon, you get to search for an Ancient Warrior card. And as a quick effect to bounce a monster, I believe, on the field. It's just a quick effect bounce, which is pretty awesome. So that's 2 cards over the course of 2 turns. Good disruption and a good protection, I guess, so to open boards. But I think the key card here is actually the spell card. The spell card, if they successfully go through and they build a full board, East by South wins. If this card is actually sent from the field to the graveyard, and that's like the key thing here. You want to actually screw up and roll the die, pop the card, send it to the graveyard. All your Ancient Warriors become spell speed 4. In other words, your opponent cannot respond to any of their card effect activation. That's a pretty big deal, so you'll always get your effect successful, and on attack, it pops cards. So every attack, it will just be blowing up your opponent's entire board, and there's nothing much your opponent can do about it since they're kind of under lockdown. Now for Speedroid, Zoom Zoom, they don't really get very much support. They get Block and Roll, which summons a token when you Synchro, and the Turbo is a free Wind special summon if you control Wind monster, but it locks you into Wind effects only, so maybe you can use it with Wind Witches. It is technically a tuner. But yeah, that's really about it. Raid Raptors, they get Arsenal Falcon, and they also get Air Raid. Arsenal Falcon's multi-attacker, depending on the number of materials it has attached. Detach a special summon out a Raid Raptor from the deck. Pretty awesome stuff overall, and when it's sent to the graveyard, it can summon out any of your Raid Raptor Xyz monster. So just summon out, an Ultimate Falcon and attach itself as material. Air Raid, it's a Ring of Destruction, and when you pop it, it summons out Revolution Falcon and attaches itself. So it seems like that's the Raid Raptor deal. They like to jump onto other ships, or rather planes. Performer Pals, they gain Odd Eyes Performer Pal Metal Claw. This is their fusion, and if you use Polymerization, it's immune to all card effects. And here's the thing, the only effect it has is it boosts your monster's attack by 300 when it attacks. And for Card Garnet, combine all of your defenses into one monster, and that's it. Whether it be the Pendulum effect or the monster effect, that's really all it does. Into the DDs, we get pure Pendulum support. The dog offers you negation, the Kidney Stone, or the Evil, offers you Pendulum negation, and then there's also the Tapeworm. This one is self-pop to pop pendulums on the field, and then if as a monster it gets popped, it special summons out a face-up pendulum monster that's DD, and I guess it summons out into the extra monster zone. That's really about it. So it's all about the pendulum support there. And then there's also Abyss Actor. Abyss Actor, this is the triple attacker. As a pendulum scale, you can target one of your Abyss Actor monsters, and then it can attack 3 monsters. And then as a monster, it can attack 3 monsters. So that's really about it. And during your turn, it cannot be destroyed by battle. So these are some of the archetypes that gain minor boosts. There's a couple more archetypes. Of course, most of these are just single card throw-ins, just one card added in. So there's Megalith Full. This is the level changer, has a quick effect to ritual summon from your hand. It's a rock. And then there's Nemesis Keystone, which, like all the other Nemesis, take a banish card back into the deck, special summon itself. It's an extender for rocks. It's also an earth. It works well with Adamantimators. You just have to find that level 3 or 5 to use it with, so that you can search it with Block Dragon. Ultimately, it's actually not that bad of a card if you can actually find the correct level 3 or 5. That also is another form of an extender. Then there is Mathmech Diameter. It helps you find the full width of a circle. I'm just kidding. It revives a level 4 Cyberse monster, and if you use this in Synchro into a Mathmech Synchro, you get to gain this effect. It gets an Omni Negate. It can negate any card effect. And then there is Koaki Meru Supplier. I love this card. It is a rock extender because if a rock gets sent to the graveyard, it special summons itself. And when it's summoned like that, you also get to add a Koaki Meru or Iron Core mentioned name card from your deck to your hand. So in other words, it's going to search out your guardians quite easily. So Keystone and Koaki Meru Supplier, these are two cards that gain my personal recommendation here. It's because they're just generic extenders and they're easy to get. I guess Supplier is an ultra rare, but Keystone, you can consider it in your Adamantimator deck if you need a bit of rock extension. It doesn't lock you into anything, which is also quite nice, and putting stuff back is also pretty good. And then there is a Super Thick Samurai. This is the Scarecrow. If you control no spell or trap, you get to take no damage. On top of no damage, it gets to revive some of your super heavy samurais into the arrow it points to. That's really about it. And then there is Strenna, the Rika Queen. Adds back a plant or a Rika from your graveyard to your hand, and if you if it's tributed with material, you can summon out a rank 5 plant from your graveyard or extract and then attach this card as material. Only 3 more pages to go. Look at all the cards we've covered. This is record speed, guys. Make sure you guys smash that thumbs up button if you guys don't even realize how much you've already learned. So, okay, for Worm and Thunder support, we have Dracoon Lamp. I guess it's just a worm monster. Applies defense whenever it's attacking. Something along those lines. Then there's Thunder Hand, which is like a hand monster. I guess it's technically an archetype, which summons itself from the graveyard when another one of your 1600 attack or defense monsters gets popped, basically your other hands. And then when it's summoned out, it also pops 1 card, which is great, I guess, but it banishes itself when it leaves the field. So that part is unfortunate. So make sure you guys overlay with it so you can keep it back in the graveyards and keep popping stuff as you go. Tuna support. This is a card I actually care about. So Red Time Reviver Emitter. This one has one of my recommendations because it is useful for breaking boards and giving you a tuner so you can go into Heckley Fibers combo. Basically, turn one of your monsters and one of your opponent's monsters face down and then summon itself out from the graveyard or the hand. It's also a tuner, so this card is pretty good. I would actually consider it if you need a fairy-based tuner that is also dark, all right? And then there's Red Poton. Basically, you can turn any of your other Poton, or I guess it can even turn itself into a tuner. And if you Synchro summon while this card is on the field, it will summon out another Poton monster from the deck. So that's basically your tuner support. They're not bad, but not the greatest. Onto the machines, you got Gizmek. This is Okami. Gizmek Okami is an extra deck killer, and you pay life to pop all of your opponent's extra deck summoned monsters, which is a pretty big deal, and it's pretty easy to summon. As long as there's 2 or more, I believe, extra deck summoned monsters on the field, you can special summon out this card. And it's big. It's 2950. And then there's Unauthorized Sal, or rather Hal 3000. It's attach to any monster, and if it ever gets destroyed while it was equipped, it summons itself back out. So yeah, this guy looks pretty evil. It's unauthorized boot up device or something like that. And then there is Machina Resavenger, which is like an honest for Machina monsters, and boost it by 1200 attack points. And if it does destroy a monster, you get to add this card back to your hand. So I guess you kind of get to cycle it. As for Dragon and Fish, the fish is like, okay, it's a fish foolish barrier. You summon it, you get the foolish or fish into the graveyard, and when it's in the graveyard, you can banish it, acting as a Digusto Emerald fish. You get to take 3 of your fish, put it back into the deck, and draw 1 card. But then I care about this card a little bit more. We have Celaglare Lunar Dragon. This card is pretty interesting because, okay, first of all, it is level 6, but you can normal summon it without any tribute, but it will lower its attack. And if it ever lowers its attack, it does affect its other effect. It gets to bounce itself back to hand and then take control of one of your opponent's monsters, which has, I believe, equal to or less attack than this card, which is a pretty big deal. If you keep it 24, you get to take something pretty big, or you boost this up and then you bounce it back. Then you can take even bigger monsters. You know, essentially acting as a quick little bait against your opponent. I think it's pretty decent. That's why it also has my underrated card appreciation stamp, which we have as the, the GOAT King. Then we have Synchro support. This one's no-brainer. We have, of course, one of the secret rares. We have the Chaos Ruler, the Magical Dragon. This is Piff's, the Magic Dragon's secret cousin that they don't really talk about anymore because he went into Yu-Gi-Oh! And we don't talk about that anymore. Of course, execute 5 cards, add a light or dark, and then mill the other 4 into the graveyard, and has a chaos summoning condition from the graveyard where you can banish a light and dark to summon this card out of the grave. And then we have the Big Tank. I completely forgot this guy's name, but we have the Synchro 7 Big Tank. You can discard cards to boost its attack, and after it has a successful battle phase, it goes through a little defusion process, or rather, desynchro process. Summon monsters from the graveyard with it up to the level of 7. So you can summon as many monsters as you want. Their effects, I guess they're negated, but you get a ton of monsters to go into link plays. And then for other extra deck support, we have the rank 4 Gaia, which is that B, the drill. And then we have Badland Fornicus, which is Linker Bell. I don't know why you want to play this card. It's an earth fairy thing that you can only summon if your opponent has I can believe you have 3 or more extra deck cards in your opponent, or you have 3 less. I don't know. It's one of those, but it's a bad land for Linkus, in my opinion. As for spell cards, the loose spell cards, we have the big money cards. We have Triple Threat, or we'll just call it the 3 Tactics Talent, which is your Pot of Greed. And then we have Forbidden Chalice with a Spell Speed 4 effect. Also hits multiple monsters, which is Forbidden Droplets. Those are 2 of the biggest cards. They're obviously recommended, but they're not my underrated appreciation cards. We have Heavenly Dragon Circle, which is tribute a worm, add a worm. If it's a non-effect monsters, instead of adding, you get to special summon it, and you can banish this card from the graveyard if you control a non-effect monsters, and then you can basically add a 10-yi card. So it can act as a really good fodder for 10-yi based decks, but if you're just playing worms, you can potentially use this to perhaps dodge effects to keep your cards alive or something like that. And then we have Magalonica, the Deep Sea City, or this card is always treated as Umi. So on activation, you top deck one of your water monsters back to the top of your deck from your deck. It can also boost one of your water monsters up to 2 levels, and when you synchro summon out a water monster, you cancel Nibiru. Basically, you look at your opponent's hand and banish 1 card until the end phase. Basically, Deep Sea Artisan's effect. And then we have Goblin Dad Hot Pot, which is a Yaminabe Party. Is it Yaminabe? Yeah, Yaminabe Party. Choose a monster. Basically, your opponent chooses the attack target for that monster, and you get to double your OG attack. So it's not really that you double the effect, you gain the additional attack of your original attack, so there's that. And then there's Dice. Roll 1 to 6, add a die roll card. Roll it again, and then you can put it back to your hand if you rolled a 1 or 6. If you roll 2, 3, 4, or 5, it's a garbage roll. And if you roll 2, 3, 4, or 5 on the second roll, you have to put it back to the top of the deck. So you get yourself a dead draw. It's pretty bad. Then there's another. This is the card that I actually do recommend, which is Blizzard. Before they made games really weird. The good old day Blizzard. Basically, it's a call by the grave for spell cards, but instead of sending them to the graveyard, you can chain it to the activation of something that's already face up, and you negate that effect, and that name is basically negated for the rest of the turn. But if that card was supposed to go to the graveyard, say you chain it to someone's call by the grave, they get to add that call by the grave back to their hand, and they get to, set it back onto their side of the field. But for the rest of the turn, of course, call by the grave can't really be used, so you get that safety net to kill your opponent before that card is even relevant again. So definitely recommend it. Okay, we're down to the last page. We have loose traps, and traps, some of these are actually quite interesting. Even one of them have my pick as underrated card of the set. We have Ice Dragon's Prison. This one just revives one of your opponent's monster, and you have the optional effect to, just banish one monster on both sides of the field with the same type. So you can use this as non-targeting removal against your opponent, or use the extra monster as body. I think it's side deck worthy at the very least. Next we have Dragon Maid Tiding, which is like a compulse with a cost, but rather than just bouncing monsters, it can also bounce stuff from the graveyard as well, which is a pretty big deal, so you can actually turn off some grave effects if that's what you're looking for. And then once it's banished from the graveyard, you can also summon out a Dragon Maid. So it's definitely a Dragon Maid based card. Next we have Junk Sleep, which is nighttime, daytime for your monsters. So if you face down defense position monsters, activate it and they all go face up into attack position. And during the end phase, they all book right back down. If you're playing a flip effect deck, this is probably the card for you because you can use it like a Desert Sunlight plus a Book of Moon wrapped up in one card. Then we have Redeemable Jar. This is an interesting card because it lets you re-add your traps. Banish a different trap, add a different trap name back to your hand. So if you use this card and activate 2020, you get to reactivate 2020 next year. Please don't do that. That's terrible. 2020 has been bad enough. Look how hot it is right now. I'm just melting. And then there's Revenge Rally. This is such a silly card. boost your opponent's monster by 500 and equip this card to him. And if they get rid of this card while equipped to your opponent's monster, you get to draw 1 card or 2 cards if they get rid of it this turn. Yeah, honestly, it's kind of meh. It's not that great. And why would you want to use this? Why don't you just use something that actually gets rid of your opponent's monster? But it's kind of cute in like a cube or a tower format, like basically a draft format. And then there is Shidol-Schism. You're going to see a lot of this card because it's played in the Dogmatica combo with the 1 card dump the Al Capone or the App Cologne, and then this card gets sent to the graveyard, and then there's just more shenanigans where you get to send Construct into the graveyard, add this card, set the card back down, and now you basically have a Winda available in the graveyard during your opponent's turn, which is a pretty sick combo. This card is, I'm not like highly recommending because it's not exactly an underrated card, but it is one of the loose supports available for trap cards, so it's a pretty big deal. And I think Shaddoll players, not just Shaddoll players, but like Dogmatica and Invoke players are going to enjoy this card as well. And with that, we have covered all the underrated and underappreciated cards of the entire set. Wait for Monday for Nishi's segment on all of the archetype coverage if you guys want to know how each of the archetype is played, including some of the ones that are lesser known of the major 4. Well, make sure you guys subscribe, ding the notification bell, and you can stay tuned for that. And can I just get a quick thumbs up for giving you guys all that info? Hopefully you guys learned a thing or two, and did we make it with the 20-minute mark? Because I'm sweating like crazy here. And of course, this video is sponsored by Bushiroad. Make sure you guys get your Vanguard 0. The link is down in the description below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.